whatever you do to make cash flow doesn't really matter, right? You could be, selling cars, you could be, doing whatever, but if you are able to put that into an asset like real estate, that's how you build the wealth piece.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Creating Wealth Podcast, where I, Kyle, from Kyle Curtin Real Estate, interview local top dogs in the real estate investing, wealth building, and personal finance industries. Let's build together. What's up, guys? This week's guest on the podcast has built an awesome real estate business and has some great accomplishments as a real estate investor so far. Kyle has a super cool story where him and his brother took a risk to bet on their visions that I can't wait for you to hear. In this episode, we get into several different topics, including direct-to-seller marketing, betting on yourself and taking risks, building wealth with real estate investing, and a phenomenal way to jump into the game, and so much more. There is a ton of incredible advice in this episode, and I hope you enjoy. Let's jump right into the episode. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 91 of the Creating Wealth Podcast. Today, we get the great pleasure of chatting with Kyle Russo, an awesome full-time real estate investor located around the Boston North Shore market. What's going on, Kyle? How's everything going, my man? Super excited to have you on.
Yeah, it's quite a pleasure to be speaking with another Kyle today.
Right?
To network with more Kyles.
I share that, my man. I feel you. Sweet. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on, man. Kind of learn a little bit about you and your real estate story. To kind of segue right into that, tell us a little bit about kind of like your superhero backstory, what kind of got you into real estate, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so in 2019, my brother Dylan and I decided to start a real estate investing company. We were both working full-time in other industries. I was working as a management consultant, and my brother was working at a financial technology startup. And we were both just not really very satisfied with our jobs. We went to a seminar, and we learned a lot about all the different ways that you can make money in real estate. There's flipping, lending, wholesaling. And we were like, okay, this sounds really interesting. And I personally have had my real estate license since I was 18. I leased apartments in Alston and Brighton for a few summers, but hadn't really been active in the business since then. And so, when 2019 rolled around and my brother was living in the area and we were both interested in this real estate investing thing and learned, some of the basics from the seminar, we said, all right, let's give this a shot. And so my brother actually left his full-time job in October of 2019. I think we formed the LLC in September. So he, really just jumped in with both feet. And then I followed shortly thereafter, actually in February of 2020, which was right before, this global pandemic that we've been living through. And so that was a very interesting time. I'm glad that I left when I did, because I think, after the pandemic hit, there was a lot more question about, people wanting stability. So I'm happy that I made the jump when I did. And, I definitely had some doubts before it. I was like, what happens if this doesn't work out? And, basically how I got myself over that hump was basically thinking, it's worrisome. Like, what happens if I try this and it doesn't work? But I was more scared about, what happens if I never try this and I'm stuck in a position, in a career, in a life that I don't really like. And that was more scary to me. And that's how I was able to sort of convince myself, like, hey, if this doesn't work out, literally, I was like, well, I have a car, I'll drive Uber for a while until I figure it out. But luckily I never had to do that.
Wow. That's incredible, man. That's absolutely awesome. Especially just when you made the jump. like right before everything kind of hit the fan, I guess, if you will, and talk about like just kind of jumping into, like just going all in on you know what I mean, and the vision, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think because we were both full time, we were able to learn and grow a little bit faster than a lot of people do it part time, and that's great too. It's great to have that W-2 income for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it allowed us to kind of grow really quickly because we were doing this all day, every day.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. So tell me a little bit about, like right after, like both you guys made the jump and we're like, all right, like we're here now, like this needs to work. Like
Yeah.
what was kind of like going through your head? Like what were you feeling? Like were you just ready to kind of like hit the ground running and kind of, start to get things going, or were you a little
Yeah,
bit?
so we our first real estate investment was actually a two-family house in Somerville that we bought before we had an LLC or any of that. So we lived in one unit and rented out the other. The typical house hack, which is always, I think, the best way to start. You get better rates, you have more control over the property and the tenant base, the tenants and anyway, so we were doing that, and then we actually found our first property on MLS back in 2019. It was December of 2019. The winter tends to be a great time to buy in this market up here. And so really, we were just focused on that flip. As soon as, so when I jumped in full time, we already had this flip well underway.
Mhm.
So I just, was focused on getting that over the finish line. So from day one, we were pretty busy from day one because we already had this thing underway.
Wow, that's awesome. Did you guys have to buy it cash or use like hard money or?
I think if I'm thinking back, yeah, we took out a loan, like a private money loan, for most of it. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Especially like to find it on the MLS, like you hear the classic like, oh, there are no good deals on the MLS, and it's like, oh well, I don't know. It's depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it depends on the market, and the last couple of years have been tighter. There hasn't been as much on the MLS, but at the same time, over the last couple of years, prices have been appreciating so much that you could kind of overpay for stuff and still do all right. But now, I don't think you're gonna see that quite as much anymore.
Yeah, there definitely has been quite the shift. I mean, even like very, very recently, with like the interest rates going bananas and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've been seeing, at least in the markets that I'm looking at, is the stuff that's priced a little too high is really just sitting for a long time. And if you're well priced and you're offering good value, if those products, those homes seem to still be going pretty quickly. But people aren't really paying 100, $200,000 over asking anymore. You're not getting 2 dozen offers. But the other thing is that, like, because the buyer demand has slowed down a little bit, there's like the rental demand is just insane. I was talking to my sister, and her rent's going up like $550
Wow.
for like a one bedroom in Boston, and so we did some rent increases this year as well, like, I don't know, like for 4 or 5%, nothing crazy, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's the rental market is really strong right now. So it's interesting, you kind of have these different levers, right? Like maybe in the economy, right? Like maybe the buyer demand is coming down a little bit, but that, conversely, rents are really skyrocketing because fewer people can afford to buy.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, man, and it's gonna be interesting because I'm doing my first unit turnover at the moment, and I'm kind of hoping that kind of helps me out a little bit in terms of like rent, and actually it's the unit that I'm in, and
Mhm.
but the thing that's interesting is so like the room that I'm in, it's actually there's like 3 bedrooms and they're all on the second floor, but you have to walk through one to get to the next one.
Uh,
And like I had a project in place to like, change the walls around and kind of, do a little project to make it kind of like the right way, quote unquote. And then one of my other tenants told me that they were leaving in like a month. So that kind of got squashed, and so I'm kind of curious how it's going to go, because, I'm just hoping that because the rental demand is kind of crazy, that it might kind of help me out a little bit. And maybe get somebody that might not mind as much. And yeah, you're definitely right though. It's really interesting, kind of the variables in which direction they're going right now. I mean, like you said, for the first time in a while, some of those properties that people used to be getting like a ridiculous amount of money over asking for aren't really happening as much. And like at the same time, like you mentioned, like the buyer pool dropped off a little bit, like after losing purchase power because the interest rates are up, and like it's a really strange position. And I'm very curious to see where it goes in the next, 3-6 months.
yeah, I mean, what's also interesting, I've been reading and listening to a lot of different things about the real estate market, and there's still like a really short supply.
Yeah.
Right. So the buyer demand is not as strong as it was, but it's still like not quite at an equilibrium, right? Because so few people are selling for a number of different reasons. I mean, one of those is that it's a difficult time to be a buyer, right? So if someone sells, unless they're moving to another state, right? It's kind of like, well, do I want to be a buyer in this market after I sell my house? And for a lot of homeowners, the answer is no. So it's an interesting time for sure. I think we're seeing a little bit less volume of transactions, but we'll see what happens for the rest of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's definitely going to be interesting.
Always is.
Yep. So Kyle, let me ask you. So like with your guys' company, I assume, do you guys do a lot of like, off market, like, direct mail marketing and, a lot of like direct to seller, I guess you could say?
So I would say, over the last 3 years, we've done a little bit of everything. And so we bought deals on MLS. We've bought deals direct from seller. We've bought deals that agents have brought us. But I think going forward for the next, 12 to 18 months, we really want to focus on going more direct to seller. So we're planning to really focus on lead generation over the coming, 6, 12, 18 months. And so we'll be doing, so like right now, as of today, we're not doing a lot of direct mail or any of that. But like we're going to make a concerted effort to do that and really ramp that up and invest in that. So, we'll be doing we'll be doing everything in terms of marketing to off market sellers. So we'll be doing direct mail, text message, calling, you name it. So we're really trying to build that funnel so that we have consistent leads coming in.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you at all. And like that's kind of the cool thing too, is like, especially having like a lot of those different options. That I used to do direct mail. I haven't done it in a while, but I heard from somebody very recently that it's been a little more saturated, I guess, and kind of like the cost per lead has gone up like significantly and stuff, and it was just kind of interesting to kind of hear like the perspective. So like they're kind of gravitating in a whole nother direction, and doing more of like a, text campaign and like cold calling and that kind of thing. And like just kind of shifting the, I guess kind of like the avenue in a different direction.
Yeah. I mean, my sense is that what really works is having multiple touch points.
Yeah.
So, like basically maybe the sequence of events is you send out direct mail to a certain address, then you text message that same address, and then you call that same address. And then hopefully by that third touch, they're like, oh yeah, Gen Team Property Group. I've heard of them because they've maybe heard of you or seen you 3 times now. So hopefully by that time, they at least have some recognition. And if they are looking to sell, hopefully they're more willing to have a conversation with you rather than just the one time out of the blue cold call. and they say no, and that's it, right? Versus what we're kind of trying to do more is have those multiple touch points to try to get in touch with people.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree. I've always found it pretty interesting too. Like, I know of, some investors that are more focused on like just hitting them once, like, and having, a much higher like volume of people. And then other people, on the other side of the spectrum that are like, all right, like let's have a smaller list that's a lot more concentrated, but we'll hit them like, 6, 7, 8 times. And then I don't know, it's just been interesting because like I see, a lot of different people doing different things. And I forget where I heard it. It was, or it could have been anywhere, honestly, but um, like one of the popular stats with like, just throwing direct mail out there is like, oh, you might not actually see something until like the seventh or the eighth or something. It's interesting to kind of see how everybody, kind of feels about it, and like, if they would rather hit like more households just like a couple times, or hit less households but hit them a heck of a lot better, to actually, like you said, kind of give them that, like, oh, I know Gen Team, like, they sent me a couple things before, and like, they texted me, called me, and then they actually have you in their heads, you know what I mean? And
Yeah, I think it really comes down to timing.
yeah.
So and that's why we're leaning towards like the more targeted approach, because um well, I guess there's two reasons. One, there are certain markets that we have done work in that we know well and can make offers with confidence, and either wholesale to another investor with confidence in our numbers, or do the rehab ourselves. So that's one reason. The other is that I think when off market sellers, I think it really comes down to timing. And what I mean is, like, they might receive your letter and it's just they're not ready yet, right? They don't have their plan in place. They're not in a position where they really need to move. But 6 months later, or a year later, maybe they are. And so we actually had that happen with a property that we bought in Everett, where we were talking with them, we made them an offer. They ended up accepting an offer that was higher. That ended up falling through. And so a year later, we stayed in touch with them. And a year later, they reached back out to us and said, we're actually now we're ready to go, and we want to go with you guys because the other guys fell through, and we have confidence you guys are gonna be able to close, and we did, and so I think that's the other thing to keep in mind is it's about timing. It's that's why sometimes you have to maybe send out mailing to the same address over a 6 month period, because maybe the first time they receive your letter, they're not ready. They're not ready to sell. But as time goes on, people's situations change, and that's our thought process there.
I totally agree, man. Yeah, no, 100%. So let me ask you this. So out of like all the deals you guys have done, like what's kind of been the, I guess, kind of like the biggest one, or like, maybe like you learned like the biggest lesson from it, or I guess what was like the most interesting? I guess you could
Yeah.
leave it open.
I would really say the most interesting one for us was, especially for me, because my brother was in the process of moving to Florida, was we did a 3-family condo conversion in Winthrop. Um, so it was an off-market deal, and it was a really big project. I mean, we're talking each unit was 14 or 1500 square feet. Plus, we finished out the basement. So all in, you're talking like 6,000 square feet, and it was pretty much a complete gut. And it was a really big project. It took about 18 months, should have taken about 9. And part of what made it very interesting is the contractor that we were using basically stopped showing up halfway through the project. So yeah, that was really difficult to work through. And In retrospect, I probably should have, taken him off the project a lot sooner and brought in another GC to finish the project. But I basically ended up GCing the project myself. And what I mean is basically like managing all the subs, basically doing like I had to be on site basically every day, right? And so I learned a ton. I learned a ton about construction management through that process. So in the end, we ended up doing pretty well on it. I don't remember exactly what the ROI was, but probably like over 15%. Which just makes me think though, like if it had gone well and we didn't go hundreds of thousands of dollars over budget, we would have been, 25, 30%, ROI. But the basically what I learned there is how important it is to buy right, because when you buy right, you have some cushion for some of these disasters. I mean, we literally were hundreds of thousands of dollars over budget because of the time and because we had to basically pay twice for things. Because it became very blurry between what we paid the contractor to do, what he actually delivered, and then it was like, well, okay, maybe we paid him to do the flooring, but he's gone and there's no floors, so it's either cry about it, take him to court, or just find someone else to do the work and get it done. And so we basically went with the last option, right? So, for a lot of the different things, we ended up having to pay a lot more than we had budgeted because we now had to kind of go and find all these subs ourselves. So, it was a big project. There were a lot of hurdles, but we learned a lot, and we ended up doing okay in the end. So that was probably, I would say, our most interesting project to date. Yeah.
That's crazy. I could just imagine, like, kind of going through that and literally, like, having to, like, just run the entire thing yourself, like, all of a sudden, and wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you learn a lot very quickly,
Talk about getting thrown into the fire, man. Oh, my goodness.
And, in retrospect, that we had been working with one contractor. And so, I think what I've learned is that and actually there's a real estate agent that I used to work with who taught me this. And what she said is, in any transaction, the party that has more options, has more power and control. So, we were talking about, if you're buying or selling a house, let's say you're a seller and you have 12 offers, right? You're in the power position, right? But if you're in a buyer's market and there's 20 houses for sale that are all similar, the buyer has the power. And that was kind of the situation here too, where I didn't have a lot of GC contacts. So, I was kind of at the mercy of, or I thought I was, at the mercy of the guy that we had hired. But, knowing what I know now and knowing how important it is to network, if that ever happened again, I would, have a much, shorter leash and get started with someone else much quicker.
Yeah. That's nuts. I mean, one of the good things I guess you could say is like just the amount of knowledge and everything that you were kind of like forced to learn, right?
Yeah.
Like, literally like not having a choice but to, just figure this out on the fly and like, make sure everything keeps going as smooth as possible and just kind of getting it done. And, hopefully it never does happen again, anything like that. But like, at least that, like you were able to, take control of that project, absolutely kill it, bring it to the finish line, and then, move on to the next thing.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's what it's all about. You got to get it over the finish line, whatever it takes, and just keep moving forward.
Definitely. Wow. So I wanted to ask you, so how do you define wealth?
I mean, I think there's like financial wealth, and then, there's other categories of wealth. You can think about mental health, you can think about physical health, spirituality, and I think they're all kind of connected. So yeah, I mean, I guess I think of wealth as having, a comfortable or abundant amount of something, right? So I think that having financial wealth allows you to also build, like your physical wealth, if you want to call it that, like your health, mental, physical, spiritual health. So I think they're all kind of connected. But what we've learned, over the last 3 years of doing this business is that there's kind of a difference between, I'm not talking now more about the financial wealth. Like there's a difference between cash flow and wealth, and they're both very important, but they're very different. So what we've actually done a lot of over the last few years is I think we actually have built a lot of wealth, because while we've been doing these flips and wholesales, we've also we've bought, like, I don't know, maybe close to 10. I think we're at like 10 or 12 rental units now, across Massachusetts and Florida. And so there's always sort of a balance between, are you buying assets for the long term, or are you creating short-term cash flow? And you need both. And right now what we're focusing on is building up that cash flow so that we have a more sustainable business and a more consistent cash flow, so that we can put that money into assets that will build wealth. So that's kind of the way I think about it. Is a wealth is a long-term thing, that you basically get from appreciation, over time, and principal pay down. And that, in order to build that wealth, you have to have money coming in from somewhere. And we've chosen to use, our flipping and wholesaling business as that cash flow piece.
I love that, man. That's awesome. It always has fascinated me how, exactly like you just said, like people build businesses to, to flip or to wholesale, and like, to actually, put the work in, hopefully make a solid return out of it, and then put that into like buy and holds, and, have it passively managed or whatever. And, just kind of keep the wheel rolling, I guess. And, just kind of keep letting things go.
Yeah, and there's the Robert Kiyosaki quote that I like, where he says, "The purpose of any business is to buy real estate."
Yeah.
And I think that's a cool way to put it, because it's kind of echoing, what I was just saying. Like, whatever you do to make cash flow doesn't really matter, right? You could be, selling cars, you could be, doing whatever, but if you are able to put that into an asset like real estate, that's how you build the wealth piece.
Yeah. It's incredibly interesting, man. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. So, Kyle, what is your best piece of advice to new investors that want to start and manage their rental portfolio?
I think house hacking is the best way to get started. I mean, you and I have both done it. There's just so many advantages to doing it. You get the residential rate, which, can be really, really important, depending on what that spread is between investor rate and residential rate. And you will be living in the property, so you'll be able to manage it much better, and you can learn the fundamentals of managing a rental property much better than if you're doing something, even if it's, down the road. It's just, I think it's just better to start with house hacking. You're managing your expenses, you're getting help paying down the mortgage, and you're kind of doing the maintenance as it comes up, because you're living there. And I think that's really the best way to get started, in terms of building a rental portfolio.
I totally agree, man. It's like the amount that, like, I personally have learned from, because I've had this property for only like 6 months, but
Okay.
like the amount of lessons and everything that I've learned so far about, exactly to your point, of kind of a lot of different areas, from like, fixing a variety of different problems as they come up. And, if you can't do it, then finding the right people to do it, and, getting quotes and that type of thing, all the way to like, managing tenants and dealing with, some great problems, not so great problems when they come up. And it's just like the amount that you learn is absolutely unbelievable,
Yeah.
and the barrier to entry is so low. I mean, it can be anywhere from like 0%, if you're a veteran, like VA loans, to 3.5%, or, most people typically use the FHA,
Yeah.
5% conventional. Like it's unbelievable. I feel like it's a lot more possible than people may realize,
Yeah,
kind
that's a
of outside.
great point. And one of the things too to think about with FHA is that it varies by state how big of a loan you can take out. So Massachusetts versus Florida, for example, you can take out a loan for like a four family for over $1 million, I think. So I mean that's a big deal. So you can basically buy an asset that's, I don't remember exactly the numbers, you have to look it up, but it's like, let's say you can buy a four family for $1.4 million and put down 3.5%. I mean, that's actually really powerful, right? I mean, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of investments where you can buy that expensive of an asset with that little money down. And obviously you need to know what you're doing and make sure the rents are large enough, are high enough to cover your mortgage expense. But if you're able to find a three or four family, you can put down very very little money and control a very expensive asset that in Massachusetts, in the greater Boston area. I mean, we've just seen so much rent and home price appreciation, that it can be a really powerful tool. So I haven't actually done that FHA loan yet, but that's something I'm definitely thinking about.
Yeah, that's wicked cool. Honestly, I didn't know that. It does make sense though, I mean, because of like the different, like purchase price ranges and like, in different
Yeah.
areas, different states, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's a table for each state. So, like in Florida, for example, if you want to buy a four family, they're only going to give you a loan of like it's like 500K or something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's like it depends on the price levels in your state.
Yeah.
So in Florida, it's much lower than it is in Massachusetts.
Yeah. I really liked there was something that you said in there as well that really stuck out to me too about, being able to have like just, that amount of leverage, in this kind of asset class, like just for that, and being able to maintain control with it. So like, I don't know, for some reason, like the thing that went into my head, like, of another kind of asset where you can take on that kind of leverage is the I forget the name of it. It's in the stock market. It's like using leverage margin. I think like the
Yeah,
marginal like trading and stuff.
yeah,
And like, yeah, like you might be able to take a lot of leverage, but you also don't have control. I mean, I don't know much about it, just kind of from like an outside perspective, but like you don't really have a lot of control, to actually like manage the type of risk that you're taking
right,
versus,
right. It's much
if
more.
you are,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
not, if you're buying a stock based on leverage, you don't control that stock. You're not sitting on the board of that company making decisions, right? You're a completely passive investor. Versus when you're buying, a four family, three family house, you're occupying one of the units, you have, a lot of control over the tenants, over the maintenance, over everything.
exactly. And that's something that I do really, really love about real estate is just the amount of control and like creativity that you can have and like, as long as you kind of like follow some of the basic, rules and like, provide a suitable, like, clean-ish, like, kind of place of housing. There's a lot of things that you can do, you know what I mean? Like, and it's unbelievable. And like, I love that there's not, you know, or I guess like the window of opportunity is very wide. Like if you wanted to turn like a really really big bedroom into like two smaller bedrooms, I mean like obviously like there's regulations and everything and like minimum square footage and like all that fun stuff, but basically like as long as you follow like just some of the rules, like the sky's the limit. Like if you have the space for it and like the zoning and like the town's cool with it, like more power to you. Like get the wall put up and now like your rents might drastically change, which could drastically change your return, and like it's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the investors who do well are the ones who are able to walk into a space and have a vision for what it's going to look like in the end, right? And not everyone has that, right? So two people can go to the same property, and see completely different end uses for it.
Yeah, and it's absolutely awesome. And like the more time that you're in the game, like the more you're gonna be able to kind of sharpen that bird's eye view of like, what that space could potentially look like and the possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Kyle, where on like social media and stuff can you guys be found? Like you, the company? I'll drop everything you have, my man.
Yeah, so we're Gen Team Property Group. We're on Instagram. My brother runs all that stuff, so I'm not even sure what the handle is, but I think if you,
I'll look it up. I got it.
Gen Team. But that's actually, one of the things that we're going to be focusing on too is like, so, we're going to be doing a lot of marketing over the next, 6 months at least. And that's part of what I really want to beef up to is our social media presence. Probably mostly Instagram, Facebook. I don't have TikTok, and I really don't want to, but I have heard that, it's kind of taking over as the biggest, most influential platform now. So maybe we'll eventually have a TikTok account. But yeah, I'm thinking about hiring someone to help with that, to help with the social media piece. So we don't have a huge presence on social media right now, but a lot of the folks that I've been meeting with who, people that companies that I want ours to be like in a few years, they all have, pretty significant social media presence. And I think that that's something that we want to build out for sure.
I don't blame you, man. And like, that's the thing too, is like, it's just tough, you know what I mean? Because like you have to actually, like create the content and like, hopefully make it look pretty decent and like posting consistently. And like, it's kind of like its own like niche that like you kind of, I feel like you might kind of need in like today's day and age.
Yeah, I think so.
Just like, part of that presence, to add on with like, the word of mouth and like, the strength of, all the relationships and past clients and that type of thing. But
yeah, it adds instant credibility, right? I mean, it's if someone's looking, like, let's say I'm looking for a private money investor, right? And I can just point to my Instagram page and say, you can check out the last 10 rehabs we've done. You can see us walking through it, the before and afters. It adds instant credibility, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like kind of like a digital resume.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely can be a little bit tough though, you know what I mean? Because it's like, like we're trying to run our own businesses and stuff like that. And like, we just want to, keep doing the actual like, tactical work and, going towards the vision. And it's like, crap, well, like we kind of like need this too, but like, I don't want to do it. And like,
yeah. And you want to do it well, right? Because you don't want to have low quality content on there. So yeah, that's something that we're going to be working on as well.
I hear you. But thank you so much for coming on here, Kyle. That was absolutely awesome, man. It was a real pleasure to, hear some of your story, hear about, Gen Team a little bit. And yeah, that was absolutely awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kyle. The pleasure is all mine. I really enjoyed chatting with you today.
All right, guys, that concludes our Creating Wealth podcast episode for today. I want to thank every single person that has listened this far. It really means a lot to know that people can learn from me and with me as we build wealth together. Hopefully you can take home at least one thing from this podcast that will improve your life just a little bit. If you could, please check me out on social. That's at Kyle Curtin Real Estate on Instagram, Facebook, and I'm on Biggerpockets. Until next time, let's build together.